Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a very interesting show for you. All right, yeah, the Florida fans are very upset. They believe there's a media bias against them, especially in the rankings of their recruits. And a couple of YouTubers confronted they actually got a meeting with the CEO. All right, folks, now in this interview, there's going to be a few profane words. Now, I blanked out the worst stuff, and it wasn't that bad, okay?
Okay.
But there's a few words that'll get through that that aren't that bad. But if you're somebody that's very sensitive to that, even if it's a mild profane word, you don't want to watch this video because it'll upset you, and then you'll get on me about it. But it's nothing major, okay? Anyway, I'm just giving you that little warning. Yeah, so they did get this interview with the CEO of On3 and had him on their show, and they kind of went back and forth. And it started out pretty congenial, and then it got spicy.
I felt that, look, because people's opinions are pretty much already made up, and they may not feel like, you don't think so?
That's asinine. No.
Why not?
We're just starting.
Oh, yeah, it got real spicy there about 2 or 3 different times. And so let me kind of explain what's happened here. Now, I think a lot of this has to do with the Jaden Rashada and the Austin Simmons situation where they both flipped, and then you had the problem with the money with Jaden Rashada and all of that. I think that's where a lot of this stems from with On3, because they came out early on the Jaden Rashada and they didn't get everything right in the story, and Florida fans have been upset ever since then. Then they came out pretty early on the Simmons flip or that whole situation, and that kind of got them a little bit upset. And then recently they've had some of their recruits that have been lowered on the ranking system. One player in particular dropped 70 spots from a 5-star down to a somewhat high 4-star, from 19th to like 90th. And he went out on Twitter to talk about it, the recruit. So all of this stems, though, from, I think there's animosity over those original stories about their 2 quarterbacks, because they're very sensitive about the quarterback situation, obviously, and for legitimate reasons. It's a big deal. So anyway, so High Top Sports came out, and this is what everybody's talking about in Florida is the media bias against them with On3. So he did a video about that, and then that got the response. So I'll show you the video in question.
And our boys got absolutely just slaughtered in their rankings, okay? And it wasn't just us. There's a few other players too. Denson was a big one that had a lot to say about it. And we got to talk about it because everyone's tweeting at these guys, and not Simmons, but Shannon Terry, the owner of On3, got himself into some debates here. He decided to answer to some tweets, which is interesting to me. I feel like that's what Twitter does, though. It allows for people, big heads to talk to just your everyday people, right? That's the only time you see big heads and CEOs responding to user 6912743. It's weird, but Twitter does that. That's what Twitter does. They rally up the troops and get you all flustered. So he responded to a tweet, basically because somebody was saying that Chad Simmons, is biased against Florida. He says Chad Simmons does not participate in rankings in any form. He is our lead reporter and a great one. All football scouting and rankings are managed by Charles Power. He bashes Charles a lot here because everyone's questioning Charles, and he just keeps tagging at Charles. He was the head of scouting and rankings for 247 at the time he left for On3. There is no bias against UF, I promise. Now, obviously nobody believes it, right? The fact that he's responding to it means that the noise is starting to trickle up the ladder of like, hey, what's going on here, right? No disrespect to anybody, but it just, somebody said the best, like, hey, look, we need actions, not words, right? And and I'll get into the numbers here in just a minute, but I want to show you this next tweet. So somebody asked the question, does Newberg or Simmons have a bias against UF, even if they don't do the rankings? He goes, they are not part of the scouting and rankings team. They are reporters and talents, no input. I wouldn't even respond to that, to be honest with you, because you basically just told me, yeah, they're extremely biased. Now, it's like being a ref, right? You got to be able to separate it. He's not doing a good job separating it. And look, he may not have an influence on recruiting, but he definitely has an influence on the videos that come out, on the knowledge that's dropped, because he knows about it. He knows what's going on. I mean, we've seen this happen before where these guys in their comments have more than likely impacted a commit or two, right? Because they've dropped things earlier. They said things. They dropped the whole Austin Simmons thing well before it was known. Remember that? Completely made a whole video saying it's committed. Nobody said a word, and they were riding high on it. And then he had to go and eat his words, but what does he care? He got his clicks and he got his views. So that's the other part here, right? Everyone's like, well, it's nonsense. On3 is not going to go anywhere, though. And all this is just keeping them in the news constantly, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. And it seems to be like they just, for the fact that he's responding to these tweets, and the people that are tweeting this out don't have much of a following, tells me that he is, he's enjoying this. Because why respond? If you're not guilty, right, and nobody's bringing a question to you that has of a higher power. It wasn't like a 247 big head was like, yeah, there seems to be some question marks here with On3. Then if I'm Shannon Terry, go, hey, easy, right? That's another company taking a shot at you. If you got user 2479 taking a shot, right, and you're responding to it, why is it getting to you? Why is it bothering you? I got questions. This is what Denson, who just committed to Michigan State, mind you, just a friendly reminder, On3 recruits tagging them. This is balls here, boys. And Charles Power had me ranked at number 19 in the beginning of the spring. Mind you, the spring was 2 months ago. Went up every website but On3. Somehow I dropped 70 spots. That's a ton. That is an absolute ton. Now, the other issue with that, right, is the other big, concern and question mark is that everybody's saying is like nobody's played a football game. So let me take a look here and show you here. 4 of Florida's top 6 commits dropped an average 70 spots in the ranking despite 0 games being played. Okay? DJ Lagway, Miles Graham, Adarius, and Childs all dropped. Okay? Mind you, Miles Graham just got a 5th star in Rivals. So I don't know what 2 people are seeing, but is what it is. Darius Hayes, now ranked 118th nationally. Remember, Darius, it was like 4, 5, and 6. We had the 4, 5, and 6 linebackers. Miles Graham is now 9th. Darius Hayes is now 7th. Aaron Childs is now 14th. The only person, and I might get some flack for this, the only person that I'm okay with is the DJ Lagway drop down. Because they had the Elite 11 camp, there are a lot of people that weren't pleased with his performance. This is not me. This is not my thoughts. This is not my opinions. There's a lot of criticism that came out. So there has to be, we need to have an even keel and even ground to this. Right, that's my thoughts on that. But yeah, it's very frustrating. As you guys are all frustrated, and look, I know what's going to happen is all these fans are going to come out and say Florida's bitching again. I'm sure some Tennessee guy will make a video saying Florida's bitching about their rankings.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
First of all, I would never do such a thing. I'm extremely offended.
How dare you?
Let's continue on. Okay, so obviously that video didn't go over well with the CEO of On3. And this has gotten to the point where even Josh Pate chimed in on Twitter, and then he actually did a video today, and I'll show you a little snippet of it.
There's also the accusation, I hear it from Florida constantly, there's the accusation that kids get bumped down after they commit to a team. I don't know what else to tell you other than it doesn't happen. I don't know what else to tell you other than there is zero motivation to do that. It would be the dumbest thing in the world. The dumbest business plan on the face of the earth is to run a recruiting site, take one of the biggest markets in college football, one of the biggest fan bases, especially if you're covering recruiting, and say, yeah, I think we'll screw them. Who would do that? Nobody does that. And I can also assure you, your greatest fears are not realized because I have been where you are. I've been a fan. I've been a subscriber of these websites. And now I'm on the other side and I'm behind the curtain. No one cares. When I say no one cares, I mean no one targets any program. That's never part of the conversation. There is no conversation where Andrew Ivins goes, we got to stick it to Florida. Okay, how are we going to do it? And there's no conversation where Wiltfong goes, amen, brother. Let's bump down that linebacker, that corner, and that safety. And then Pategna walks in and says, why? And they in unison say, because it's Florida. It doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. I know that you can pull up examples.
Oh, yeah. So the troops have been called in on this one. And Josh Pate, he's actually making a lot of sense. It would be stupid for them to be biased against Florida or any other team. But it just so happens everybody's biased against the Vols, as we all know. That is a very real thing. I don't think anybody's biased against Florida at all. But, like I said, there are underlying issues, and they'll get into that when they talk to the CEO, and then you'll kind of find out what this sort of stems from. But it's been kind of simmering for a while with On3.
This is a class that Florida at this point should be happy about. Some Twitter rants and some people upset because our ratings are lower than the other three services is asinine.
Sure.
Like, why would we care? Why would we measure our rating against ESPN, 24/7, and Rivals? That's craziness. Like, we measure it based on our models, our contacts with the colleges and assistants and scouts. What 24/7, ESPN, and Rivals thinks about a kid is unbelievably, we could care less. And that's not disrespecting what they do, but why would we use them as a baseline for how to evaluate a player? And that's what I love about Charles Power, who leads this for us. Anyone that knows Charles, and look, I hired 200 plus people at 24/7 that I ran for 10 years. I've got 200 employees at On3. Find me one that will say that Charles Powers is biased towards any school. Charles Powers probably kryptonite is that he could care less about the school part.
Is there a reason you keep referring to 247 and Rivals? Because I haven't mentioned them once nor compared them to you, so I don't know where the reasoning. Okay.
Yes, because the baseline of the complaint is that we are ranking players lower than the other services. That's the baseline of the complaint.
Okay. So
that's the only thing you can be complaining about if you're a Florida fan, because Florida, do you really think you have the number one class right now? We have you number 3.
No, not at all.
And so you're winning. We got you 3.
So let me ask, you said Charles Powers, he does the rankings. He's the sole person that does the rankings, correct?
No, there isn't a sole person by any means, because we have 200 employees. Our first order of operation and scouting is to take the feedback from the college coaches, the college assistants in the field to identify an order of players. When DeMarco Murray tells me, or tells one of our people that this running back is generational talent, I listen to him. We listen to him.
All right. Okay. So I got the notion that when you said that, it was just him. So that's why I was confused. I was like, how does one guy do the
impossible? That would be impossible.
Yeah, I want to kind of go back to what you were stating because, again, we're talking about, you said facts don't care about feelings. In a clip that just got retweeted by Josh Pate, kind of taking a jab at me because I raised the question, why respond to user 24679?
Ryan Barbecue.
I have been criticized of that. I do that. I find myself trying to get into it's just it's human nature. You see somebody kind of taking a jab because again, facts don't care about feelings. If everything you just stated, you've got a great base. The UF supports you. All these things. Why bother to respond? Now, before you answer that question, the reason why the video was even created was because I did see you respond, and I'm like, okay, well now it's like he's responding to it, trying to defend it.
Easy. This is easy because there's people in that text that are legitimate people, and so I'm just responding in that thread. Yes.
Okay.
I'm just responding.
And look, you may be able to persuade them, and hopefully, like they watch this and their opinion changes. I think that'd be great, right? I would like for that to happen to where like, hey, we can get on an even playing field. It's more understanding. I felt that because people's opinions are pretty much already made up, and they may not feel like you don't think so?
That's asinine. No.
Why not?
We're just starting. Do you think people's opinions are made up over Zach and Nick and Corey and Keith? They're the representatives of On3. No, there's no possibility. That is a very, very short-sighted view that people, a very small lynch mob group on Twitter, and a recruiting process not even close yet to being finished. Facts don't care about feelings. All right, what else we got to talk about? Because I can't.
No, you can't. Look, I get it. You can't sit here all day. Yeah, no, I think you've done a great job.
Yeah.
I think the next part I kind of want to address. You tweeted about Newberg and Simmons, those guys being talents, and you referring back to. Sure. You're referring just a minute ago. You were talking about kind of guys, being reporting and reporting the news, and I said, hey. You were like, why would I invest money? And I said, hey, because you could create a story. And you're like, why would I do that? Well, again, Newberg and Simmons, those guys are talents, i.e. they create opinionated stories. Not all of their things that they say are facts. They have feelings in their approach to the situation. Same thing with J.D. Pickle. Those are feelings. They're using facts to maybe approach.
Let me address those guys very specifically. Okay, number one, Chad Simmons is a reporter for us. Everything he does is firsthand. Chad Simmons spends more time on the road. Sorry,
Isn't he the director of recruiting?
director of recruiting media. So he has no involvement in scouting or ratings. He spends 20 out of 30 days a month going and interviewing kids. He has nothing to do with the rating.
So either way, that happened. And then there's obviously the Jaden Rosado situation, which Dave had more questions on that with how that was written about.
Okay.
Oh.
I,
Am I allowed to talk now?
Yeah, you can go, Dave.
So back when the Rashada situation went about, I'm close with Eddie Rojas. I've worked with him at Gator Collective. I kind of work with Florida Victorious now. The whole article, I won't say the whole article was wrong, but there was a lot of statements that were not right in that article. And it happened a long time ago. So details, obviously, they left my head. But I talked to Eddie on the phone. He said, yeah, a lot of it, nobody reached out to him. Nobody reached out to Jen. They got one side of the story. Like, they got Miami side and never even tried to get Florida side of it. And then later on, I think I interviewed Nick Delatorre, and he could only say what he could because of legal reasons. But why was that story broke by national writers and they didn't get both sides of the story?
So I don't know how to answer that question because I'm not the editor of On3, and you're looking back at a long. And I'm really not. I really don't know the answer. I'd be happy to dig into it and get back with you. But wasn't that story reported by On3 by Pete Nakos? Is that the? Yeah. I mean, I honestly just don't. I don't remember and couldn't defend or tell you, what the process is that On3 went through.
I was going to say, I just think the general frustration sometimes comes from Florida fans, not because of rankings. I'm not even talking about rankings. I don't even care about the rankings. I'm talking about sometimes things get misreported, and it happens everywhere. It just doesn't happen at On3. But it was a consistent thing that they kept getting the totals wrong. They kept reporting all this other crazy stuff, and I think they only got one side of it. And there was an agent involved. There was one side. There was Miami side. There was players involved, and then there was
honestly.
Yeah, that is kind of the start of this that got everybody kind of down on On3 down in Florida was the whole Jaden Rashada. Like I say, then the Simmons thing, and now the recruiting rankings dropping as far as some of their key players.
Oh, well, there's strikes 2 and 3 right there.
So that was pretty interesting there.
And so does that mean that there are mistakes along the way? Absolutely. It happened, but I can't speak to technically, what processes went into covering that. And obviously it's a situation where Florida, any way you slice it, looks bad or looked bad at the time.
Yeah. And that's kind of because I've kind of been in this industry before. I've worked for Chomp Talk. I've worked at Gator Country. I've worked at, tons of sites where you have to report on some things. And I don't try to prematurely think. I'm not one of those guys that likes to try to be first or anything like that. But I think later on, in the process, if there's a national story, especially it has to do with an NIL, even if it's an NIL deal or something else, I think it's better just ask both sides before the article gets released and not just
100%. And again, I defend the fact that those guys are seasoned reporters, and there's an editorial process in place. None of those guys can just go write a story and post it on their own. I mean, that's as old school newsroom division as you can get.
So I don't want to take too much of your time. Again, I appreciate you hopping on here. To kind of recap again, I know you're dismissing it like facts don't cover feelings, and I hear you, and I think kind of hearing you kind of talk about too. Obviously, you're overseeing everything. You're not just seeing Florida football. That's the least of your worries. Obviously, we're in it. We're constantly involved with it, and that's kind of where we were coming from. Where it feels like, and look, the Jaden Rosado situation, Florida's just as guilty, but how things were reported, that's kind of where things are stemming from. But the last question I have, and I asked this question at the end of my little rant yesterday about the entire situation, was just questioning why the move for a certain player, right? The only person that made sense to me for the move was DJ, because he played at your Elite 11 camp. I was like, look, there was a lot of negative publicity that came out of that camp about DJ Lagway. So I expected him, honestly, to move down just because of the noise that came out from that. The other players, I could be wrong here, but not much football hasn't played. Maybe there were some camps that were talked about. I guess the question, again, shorten it up here, why the moves? Is there an explanation for that, or is that kind of going back to?
I would like to address why the moves, why the new ranking, not address any moves of the Florida commits.
Sure.
I have no clue.
No, in
clue.
general, not individually, in general. Yes.
Okay, so number one, we have a lot more track data than we had. Number two, we have a lot more official visit data. So we know the 6'3" kids that are 5'11" and a half. Number whatever that is, number three, we've had an enormous amount of time to gather high risk situations as it relates to, which kids are at a higher risk because of, the way they're raised, or, all the things that we would never say publicly. So there's also some camps. There's a lot more staff feedback. There's a lot more, hey, is this, Brian Hartline, is this your number one wide receiver? Or is this your number one wide receiver? And DeMarco Murray, what do you think about this running back? And look, I'm just throwing those two guys' names out because they're my close personal friends. We sample from almost every assistant out there. That is the biggest, hidden gem of the entire recruiting industry.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting to hear that. I didn't know they took those types of things into consideration as far as, he said at one point, he said if a recruit falls asleep while the coach is giving a speech or something to the recruits, they mark that down because they hear it from the coach. So everything kind of gets taken into consideration. And he did say at one point that they're trying to rank 19,000 players and trying to get them in the top 1,000. So it is a lot of work. And I think he answered that pretty well.
So is it safe to say then, so if you're asking Brian Hartline, then you're asking the likes of Billy, Austin Armstrong, again, kind of going back to Florida with us being kind of this question about Florida, are they asking those coaches on their opinions on guys' rankings as well too? So the coaches have an input on these rankings as well?
I mean, that's what I just spent 40 minutes talking about. The rankings are built from the feedback from the coaches that we have grown up with in this industry. I mean, that is the most critical piece of data for 24/7, for Rivals, and for On3, is when a coach like a Brian Hartline and DeMarco Murray.
I'm not here to get into a pissing contest with you guys, but it's also too, again, you guys are a site. We're going to critique your thoughts and opinions, and that's all that was. So I don't have anything else.
Completely fair.
Oh yeah, that was very interesting. I learned a bunch. I wasn't really sure how they did all those rankings. I didn't know they took all those things into consideration. And that is a very daunting task to try to rate that many players, especially with NIL involved now, because those rankings dictate how much money those players are going to get. So it's going to get a lot spicier and a lot more difficult now that money's involved. It used to be just stars and, that sort of thing. And then you proved it out on the field, and then you got your money in the NFL. Well, now those rankings have a huge role in how much money you're going to get, and it could make hundreds of thousands of dollars difference. So you're going to see a lot more eyeballs on that, without question. And I just thought I would cover this. The Florida fans being upset about what they think is media bias, they're pretty upset about it, and I thought that was a really good interview. And I got to give the YouTubers, High Top Sports, some credit for that, because that was a good get. Okay, I can just tell you as a YouTuber, and that's one of the things I like about YouTube, is you get to watch something like this where they'll get real with you. They'll get more real with you on YouTube than that guy would if he went on ESPN. Okay, he's not going to sit there and use profane words and really get into the dicey stuff. And you could tell he was wanting to go off a couple times, but he kind of kept it under control. He kind of reminded me of Malcolm Tucker being kind of keyed up during that interview.
Now Gomer's got you all keyed up again.
I'm not keyed up.
Oh yeah, he was keyed up for sure. And if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Let's continue to cover the Vols and all our opponents and SEC and all that good stuff. If you've not subscribed, it's on your right, my left. Just hit that little button. I would appreciate it. And right over here's the most recent video. Be sure to check that one out. YouTube thinks you'll love it. And we will see you next time on Sports Talk J.